Well, hello there. It's April tomorrow, and that means that it's time to buy skis. This is the time of year where you can find pretty good deals on secondhand skis. As you can see right here, I've got a pretty robust ski quiver, and all except these skis over here were acquired secondhand. And the reason these were bought new is because I didn't know anything about cross-country skis at the time. So the purpose of this video is to give you the lowdown on this kind of gear so that you can save yourself a lot of money by not buying new gear, although that potentially kills the sport. If you're trying to build a quiver secondhand like I've done, it requires a lot of patience generally. I have been working on this quiver for maybe about 3 years. If you're looking at this and you're overwhelmed, don't feel like you need to have a quiver like mine. Part of why my quiver is like this is, one, I find some really good deals, and two, my wife and I can use these skis together. But I want to explain each part of my quiver so that maybe you can choose which parts of a quiver you might need and be able to recognize a good deal when you see one. The way I've organized this today is from generally the most downhill oriented, most flotation on the far side over there, to the least flotation, but the lightest and best cross-country skis on the near side over here. All of the skis we'll be looking at today have a waxless fish scale type base underfoot for grip, metal edges, and are what would be considered backcountry cross-country skis, although arguably the volets on the end there aren't really cross-country at all. Focusing first on the more cross-country oriented section of my quiver, we've got the Fisher Outback 68s. It means they are 68 millimeters in the shovel. And right next to them are the Fisher E99s. Those are some old school ones. And those are 215 centimeters long. The Outback 68s are 189 centimeters long. These pair nicely with NNNBC bindings and fairly lightweight NNNBC boots. Because they are 68 millimeters at the widest point, these can be used in the tracks at groomed cross-country areas. They're the only ones of this quiver that would fit in the tracks. Turning our focus now to the middle section of my quiver, this is where we now get into cross-country downhill territory. We've got the old school Fisher S-bound out-of-bound crowns, these ones as well as these ones. These are 189 centimeters. Because they're a little longer, I paired them with NNNBC bindings, whereas the 179 version, I put 3-pin bindings on because I figure I'll use those when I want to turn a little more sharply, maybe for summer snow fields or spring corn skiing. And then next to those ones, we have a more modern type ski, Fisher S-bound 98s. Those could have 3 pins, but I put NNNBC bindings on them because I wanted to have a turnier ski that still would allow me to tour comfortably the way NNNBC allows you to. And with these, I would probably use some type of stiffer NNNBC boot. I've got these tall ones with plastic cuffs and buckles, and then just some stiffer leathers. These other skis, generally stiffer leather is nice, but maybe not absolutely required. They're still narrow enough to get on edge without that stiff of a boot. Since these skis right here do have 3-pin bindings on them, I could technically pair them with plastic boots, but I'm unlikely to ever do that. I like leather on these, and really, if I'm going to use them for summer skiing, I want a boot that'll fit in a backpack. Those big plastic boots over there just don't fit very well. If you're a Slumdog Skillionaire like I am, you're basically going to be limited to NNNBC or 3-pin binding setups. But if you are trying to modernize your setup a little bit, I'd say that the range that would work for something like the new Explore binding would be from right here, the S-bound out-of-bound crowns, to probably right about there. But of course, you can do whatever you want and you can make it work as long as you know the limitations of the setup that you are creating. These older S-bound, out-of-bound crown skis are 88 millimeters in the tip, and I think they have 20 millimeters of side cut, and also a long, stiff camber underfoot. So they're really trying to hit the compromise between turnability and still being a cross-country ski. The S-bound 98s up here are 98 millimeters, basically 100 millimeters in the tip, have a much softer camber, although still a little stiffer than these skis on the far side. And now focusing on those fat, downhill-oriented skis on the far side. First, we've got my Mad Shoes Anims. They are 110 millimeters in the tip and 78 right here. Basically 30 millimeters of side cut, which is the same as the S-bound 98s. And also, surprisingly somewhat, about the same as the Volet Hypervector BCs on the far end, which are about 130 plus millimeters in the tip and 100 millimeters underfoot. For boots and bindings on my widest, most downhill-oriented skis, I've got 3-pin bindings with cable and spring possibilities. And on the Anims in red there, I seldom attach the springs because I think all of this amount of ski in front of the binding makes it so that it actually skis pretty well just with 3 pins. But with the Hypervector BCs, they're a little shorter and they're mounted a little further forward. I guess that helps them turn better, but it also means that if I don't attach my heel cables, which I generally just have sitting behind my heel risers, then I feel like I'm a little more prone to getting some tip dive. And so attaching those heel pieces helps me sort of keep a more compact stance so that my tips aren't going to get too far behind me and then dive into the snow. Quick note about the bindings I have on the Volets. I had the option to swap some regular Volet switchback bindings on, but as you can see right here, the pivot point is further back on the 3-pin hard wires, and I prefer touring with 3 pins versus free pivot. And the Volet Hypervector BCs, I basically exclusively ski with plastic telly boots, like the Scarpa T2s in blue and the T3s in brown. With my red Mod Shoes Anims, I'll sometimes use the T3s, and I'll sometimes use old stiff leather boots. And really, when I'm pairing my Anims with a leather boot, I'd say it starts to move a little bit from the fat downhill-oriented end of my quiver and into maybe this central zone here with these other ones. If you're trying to build a quiver on a tight budget, like I've done right here, one thing I've learned is that you really can't be that picky all the time, especially when it comes to boots. And so a strategy that helps me is having a sock quiver as well. That way I can adjust the fit of boots a little bit. So if I get one that's maybe a little tighter, I'll wear a thin sock. If it's pretty spacious, these muckluck socks can help take up the space, and I'll wear a thin sock inside of this muckluck, and that can make this large quiver of boots work for my feet and keep them pretty comfortable. So really what I've just explained to you is my starting lineup of skis, but it's helpful sometimes to have some bench warmers. I've got a lot more than just these ones. They exist maybe if I want to experiment a little bit. These are skis that I typically just find on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist that are being given away for free, and I snag them so I can maybe try things out or possibly use the bindings if something breaks on one of my starting lineup skis. And then there's a little bit of a pole quiver as well. Some actual like alpine poles over there. Not the most versatile, but if I'm in certain conditions where I don't need flotation on the tip, then I might use those. If I want the internet to make fun of me for using poles that are too long, I'll use my bamboo poles. They've got a nice wide basket. That's pretty much a necessity for a backcountry ski pole. And then some adjustable ones as well. Those are probably the ones I use the most because, as you can see, they can go really long if I have a long tour or want to try skating or something. They can also go really short, so I can stick them on my backpack for doing some summer skiing. All right, I'll close this video out with a little note about pricing so you can recognize a potentially good deal. Basically, if you're looking at one of these older skis, I would say you'd want it to be 50 bucks or less. If you're looking at these more modern skis, but still a few years old, like the Anims or the S-Bound 98s, if it's around 100 bucks, definitely go for it. And if you're looking at one of these very modern skis, like the Voile Hypervector BCs, 300 or less used, definitely go for it. That's not to say I paid that much for all of these, but I think those would be good deals. For all these boots, I'm not spending any more than 50 bucks on a boot. Well, there you have it. Happy shopping, but especially happy skiing.